Welcome back to Offline with Lopez Radio. This is episode 6, and my guest today is Brian Clarke from Darkstone Digital. He's not only the solo developer, he's also the founder. You can follow him on Twitter at @DSDigitalDev. He's also on Twitch as Darkstone Digital. I'll have links to both those down below in the description, as well as links to his games, including the brand new Mortuary Assistant, a very addictive, very fun horror game. We get into a lot today. He was nice enough to sit down with us for a good long while, talk about how he got into game development. We talk a little bit about solo versus team development, because he's been a part of a lot of really big studios in developing through his career. And I also ask him what his top advice for aspiring or young developers could be. This is a very good episode for young developers or anyone really wanting to create something to watch, because there is valuable advice for any genre of creation in this episode. He also comes with me over to Lopez Radio, where we talk for another couple of hours about the Mortuary Assistant, about him, about his background, about some of his processes, as well as answering some of your questions that I gathered on Twitter and through my Twitch community. I'll have a link to that episode of Lopez Radio down below as well, so be sure to check it out after you've enjoyed episode 6 of Offline with Lopez Radio. Brian, welcome to Offline, man. I really appreciate you being here. I know it's been a very, very busy month and a half, 2 months, 2 years, really. But I mean,
it's been busy for a bit, yeah.
since release of the Mortuary Assistant, it's I'm sure it's been balls to the wall crazy.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries.
Nice to take a break from things.
Yeah, you even gave yourself a little bit of a break recently. You did some vacationing, right?
I mean, yeah. I went and visited family, and that's as vacation-y as it can be. You know, I haven't. It's not like there's been something where I planned a vacation for the family and everything, or go do this. It's like these were things that, I agreed to see the family, like months ago, and then it was followed immediately by visiting my wife's family, so see my mother-in-law. So it's like it's time away.
Yeah, it's the grand tour, and I'm sure if you got a freshly released game, it's probably in the back of your mind the whole time. Like, what am I gonna do next? What am I gonna patch next?
Yeah, a little bit. It's tough to do those, because I left 2 weeks after launch, and my family originally wanted to do it sooner, but I was like, I have to have some time to be able to deal with bugs and stuff like that. And for the most part, it was in a good spot when I left, but it's tough to like still check Twitter every now and then and see bugs people run into, and it's like, oh, there's nothing I can do about this. But eventually, able to take care of it. I have a buddy that kind of took on in a mini freelance capacity to do some bug work while I was gone, to make sure that some bugs still got fixed. Like, as soon as I got back, I could put a patch out that fixed things. So
that's helpful. Yeah, that's really helpful. Do you find it's hard to, like, when you're in the situation, to kind of just turn your brain off and enjoy just hanging out with family and stuff like that? Or is it still just always itching at you?
Yeah. I mean, this soon after launch, yeah, it's always kind of there, because you've got so many things to keep track of. You got audience perception, like how people enjoy the game, bugs that people are running into. There's obviously sales numbers and stuff like that too. And you're trying to be on top of all these things. And I've got a publisher, so I still had like meetings I have a meeting every Thursday with them, so trying to match those if I could. One of the weeks I was in a cabin with like no internet, basically, so that pretty much wasn't going to happen. But there was enough to just see things to freak out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
It's like it's always there. And I mean, if it was like a month from now, it'd probably be easier for me to kind of put it on the back burner and relax a little bit. But it's just, I'm such a like, people will be like, oh, it's great to see, so supportive of your game after launch. And it's like, in my mind, like, I can't imagine not doing that. Like, I can't imagine putting something that you've worked on for so long out there and then not support it. Right. So my brain is just like in support mode, and it's going to take a while for that to cool off, I think.
Right. It's like your fresh digital baby. Like, what do you don't want to leave its side right away. And
yeah, exactly.
I'm sure that's something that is just tough to kind of parse from, because like you said, like we talked about, you have been doing this for 2 years. You've been putting this thing together, and it's just insane. And I feel like great timing, just because like everybody's just thirsting for horror content. You know, they want a game to play and stuff like that. And then like you come right out of like the I guess the high of the release, and then you're going right into Halloween. So I'm sure it's going to be another round of just people going crazy with the game too.
Well, I hope so. And I mean, I'm trying to ride that also. Like, I mean, you know, the game's got a lot of replayability, so people, I imagine, will jump in and run it. But I really want the game to become something that every Halloween people are like, oh, well, we got to play this, right? And so that's going to be some growth post-launch that I'm going to keep adding to, that I think will facilitate that even more. And that's why for like this Halloween, I'm trying to aim for some new bodies, some new haunting events, and I would really like to get another ending in. Like, I think that would be great if I could get some new lore and like stuff, like even just like one side thing people can do that lead to unlocking another ending. I think that would be such an awesome thing to be able to have out there, so that people, you know, they don't just jump in to get some spooky times for Halloween. They also get something they can really sink their teeth into during that time and get invested in.
Yeah.
We'll see what I'm able to do, but
that'd be really awesome. I mean, I think that like people are very used to a game coming out and it's just, all right, well, this is pretty much it, unless they drop a DLC like down the road or something like that. But you know, you've always been, it's been great to play your games. We think we met in 2018, probably right before you released The Subject. Was that 2017 or 2018? I can't remember. I think it was 18.
I think 18. Yeah, I think 18.
Atlanta DreamHack.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And I was playing the game when it came out. I also played, Cohate and Our Secret Below, but you were like actively patching things while I was playing. It was really funny. You're like, hey, I just patched this thing. I was like, what? I was like, okay. So we'd redo it. It was really neat. It's kind of a surreal experience. But you've been doing this for a while. So with Offline, I kind of try to get into the head of a creator, like, you know, what makes them tick, what makes them kind of do the thing they do. Can you remember what sent you in the direction of game development when you were, you know, kind of figuring out what to do with your life?
Well, I think it actually started like, I think I really got into messing with stuff that was heading into the game development direction when I was maybe like 14. I was messing around with, I was playing Half-Life, and I was messing around with the Hammer editor in that. I was playing Unreal Tournament, the original, and messing with the editor there. And I was doing things like simple stuff, like I was trying to figure out how to open their proprietary packaging for stuff and extract textures and just change the textures for characters, right? So I was doing like color changes or putting little designs on them and stuff like that. So it was the first thing where I was trying to like put stuff in. And then I was just messing with little mod stuff. I remember making little 3D renders of like the horrible looking like laser guns, and I rendered them out and used them as sprites in Duke Nukem 3D. And like just random little things like that, where I was kind of just interested in doing it, and I didn't even realize it was something that could be a career. It didn't dawn on me that like people made these things that I was messing with and they were paid to do it. Right. So that didn't quite dawn on me for a few more years. Like, it was just something that I really messed with for the next like 4 years. And I think when I was like maybe 17, a representative from the Art Institute, which is not a great school, but I went into a lot of debt with that school. But regardless, a representative came and talked about their video game art program. And that's where I was like, oh, all the stuff I've been doing could be a thing. And I had been like messing around with a very, very early version of 3D Studio Max. And like it was like Pad 3D or something. Like I was just kind of getting into doing all these random things with 3D and like not even thinking about what it meant. And that's when stuff sort of clicked that this is what I could do. And I ended up going to Art Institute in Phoenix. And that brought me sort of to school for that. And that's how that all sort of happened. Was I didn't go into it going, I want to make video games. I think I was at that age. I think it was right around a time where people still weren't realizing that was like a career you could have, right? It's a little more mainstream now as a potential, like, oh, I want to make video games, especially with so many tools like at your disposal, just super easily for free. But back then, it's almost like you discovered that it was something you could do.
Yeah. It's always interesting too, at those ages you were talking about, like 14, 17, like those are the times, like looking back now, you're like, those are the times I had the time to figure out how to use a complicated program because I had nothing else going on. Like I was just, sitting there trying to, learn. A friend of mine, you always had that one friend that was like, he was doing HTML before everybody else. And he was like, he was like in 1996, he was like, got Winamp up and he's playing music. I'm just like, where's the CD at? He's like, oh, these are MP3s, man. These are going to be huge, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, Napster wasn't even like close, in the next few years. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but he's always talking to people in Japan and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you're going to be doing some crazy. He ended up going on to work for like Capcom, doing like social media stuff. And because I think they just recruited him out of he loved Street Fighter so much that he just started setting up his own tournaments in Atlanta and started like getting bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden Capcom's like, come join us. It's just weird how all that happens because I hung out with that guy all the time. And now he's just like in San Francisco, bigwig for Capcom. It's funny, those paths, man.
Well, I remember, God, it was in high school. I was messing around with just making web pages, and I did this thing where I went and found like all these different like Java games people had made, and I compiled them all on my website and just had a big collection of games people could play in browser. And everybody in my class was like loading it up during their free time to be able to play these games. It didn't even dawn on me that could be something that I could turn into a usable site. I mean, you look at, what was it, eBaum's World or whatever that came up not too long after that.
Yeah.
That it's like, I look back on that and I go, oh my God, I basically did that. But oh no, like, it's just a horrible, like, I could have thought about it a little harder. But yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff like that. And it always feels like that time's gone. Mm-hmm. But there's always little footholds that you can find that are the new hotness that people haven't really explored yet. Things like VR and stuff like that, where I don't think they've gotten the love they need yet. So there's still stuff out there to explore, things like that, and get discovered and everything.
Yeah. It's interesting because sometimes you just happen to meet the right people, or sometimes you see something, like you said, you were like, oh, I didn't even realize I could do this as a job, or I could do this and make a little bit of money. Like, and by the way, I came this close to going to Art Institute of Atlanta for sound production. And so
what did you end up doing instead?
I went to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting and sunk my money in there. All
right, it was probably still better than Art Institute. But,
maybe I don't
even know if they're around anymore. Honestly,
you don't see those commercials all the time anymore. That's for sure.
Super don't. Yeah.
But yeah, it's always interesting to just find out like what I know some other people that they got kind of into developing a little bit, and it always started with something like a level maker in a game, when they would let you make a level, or they would let you do so like Excite Bike on NES back in the day.
Oh my God, you could build Bike. Yes, I love that. I spent so much time in that editor.
Yeah, you just make the really tall ramps all the way down because you just wanted your guy to just fly across the top of the screen or whatever. And but it always starts somewhere weird like that. But I mean, so you kind of like not even knowingly self-started, right? Like as far as getting onto that path.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, kind of.
It's kind of crazy. But then you worked up. Do you remember like your first big deal gig where you were like, wow, this is like, I'm working for I'm a developer for somebody making a pretty big game. Yeah.
That was Mythic Entertainment on Warhammer. That was back in 2005, I think.
Yeah.
God. Yeah. That's Yeah. I was, that was actually, I was hired out of school. I didn't finish Art Institute. I did like 2 years of their 3-year program or something, and did a level design final and posted it online. And this is one of those things where like we were just talking about, someone on that site happened to see it. They're on the art team. They know they're looking for world builders. And so they contacted me, and I had some back and forth with them, and then their lead, and then the art director, because I kept saying no. they kept coming back, which is, nowadays I feel like they just feel like, okay, whatever, and go on to the next person.
Mm-hmm.
But, back then it's like, I had a lot of doubt, because I was like, well, I don't know, I should finish school. There's a lot of this, like, school being important, getting the degree being important. So, I was still kind of under that. And that's why they kept coming back being like, well, maybe speak to the lead, maybe speak to the art director. And then after a bit, I remember talking to my teacher, and I was like, this studio wants me to do a test for them and, see if I could come work for them. Do you think that's something I should do? Or do you think I should, like, just wait and finish my stuff? And he's like, what are you going to school for? It's like, well, to do this, I guess. He's like, yeah, you're going to school to do this. So why wouldn't you just go do this if they're offering you to do that? It's like, okay. He's like, yeah, you should just try it. And all right, cool. So I did the test, and yeah, sure enough, they flew me out and did an interview, went well. And so I started working on Warhammer Online: Age of Reckoning. That was my first title. And then I was kind of in MMOs for a while since then. But yeah, that was the first, like, when I remember very specifically when I printed the plane ticket at the airport, it really dawned on me, because I was like, holy shit, these guys, sorry, I don't know if I can. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you go for it. Yeah, okay, whatever.
All right, cool. I was just like, I can't believe, okay, someone spent money on this. Like, this costs money to do. Mm-hmm. And it all worked out. I've printed up this thing. I am actually going out there. And that's where it really dawned on me that this is like a real thing. And from there, it's like the learning just grew exponentially with like you're surrounded by professionals that know what they're doing, and like your skill sets they just go crazy after that.
Yeah, you kind of like soak it up like a sponge, right? Like you're just kind of like, all right, I didn't know you could do it like that, and now you've got a thing.
I was 20 years old, and like I'm gonna impress everybody that I can, and so I tried to just learn everything I could and do everything I could, and it worked out. I left there a lead, I think, in 2008, and that's why I went to Tryon. Yeah, that's crazy, because essentially you got like NBA drafted out of like college before you finished, as far as video games are concerned. They're kind of like, let's save you that last year of Art Institute tuition and get you in to start working. It was already so much. So, it's good. It's good that didn't happen. But
now looking back on it, you're just like, wow, I saved a whole year of that. That's great.
Yeah, how much it could have been. Especially, it's a good note for anybody, if you've got anybody listening that wants to do, especially the creative side of things. If you want to be an artist of some type, obviously, you go to school to like learn the fundamentals if you don't know them. If you need school for that structure, some people need it, but you also don't have to go to school. Like most of the things that I did that got me the job, I learned myself, because Art Institute not being super great. I learned some fundamental stuff there, but a lot of it I already knew from when I was 14, kind of teaching myself this stuff. And then I took time outside of school to like mess around in Unreal more, and like mess around in 3D Studio Max, and get as good as I could in those things. And that's where I made those levels that, I went outside of the time for these assignments to make levels and stuff. And that's where that came from, was just putting in that extra effort. But, and if you're not someone who needs that sort of structure to give you like tasks, if you can give yourself your own tasks and you can actually improve, like, you don't even really need to go to school. I've worked with people. I believe my first senior above me did not have his GED. So it's like, you don't need that if you're a good artist. So right. There's paths for everybody in the game industry. Obviously, if you're doing engineering, that's a different story. But
yeah, and that's interesting too. Like how you said, you create tasks for yourself, because it kind of leads me into what I wanted to ask you about next. And like, obviously, you've done development on a very high level. We'll talk more about I'm sure you working on the MMOs and working for Disney a little bit, like stuff like that. But that difference of, okay, I'm stepping out, I'm doing my own thing, and I'm doing it solo. Is it a lot like what you were saying about school? Like, you have to be really obviously motivated to give yourself those tasks and keep yourself, be hard on yourself to kind of keep things moving, because you don't have that team that's like, we're doing things, what are you doing kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, everybody's got different ways of being motivated, I think. But the one universal thing that I kind of tell everybody is like, break things down into small tasks. Because I think it's really easy to have this like a grand game idea, and then you spin your wheels for a while on it, and you think you've got it figured out, and then you sit down and you go, oh well, I don't know where to start, right? Like you've made this giant club sandwich of a video game, and you don't know where to take your bite, right? So it's important to kind of step back and look at those things and make it basically milestones. This is stuff that I got used to doing in AAA. That I think is where that experience really helped me, is that understanding of the importance of breaking something down into milestones. Take those milestones, break them down into larger goals, and take those larger goals and break them down into individual tasks. Right. So especially when you're working on your own, like the reward center of your brain needs to keep firing. Otherwise, you're going to lose motivation. You feel like you're not going anywhere. You start to get that little failure feeling, and that imposter syndrome starts to really sink in. So if you give yourself smaller tasks, like say, when I had to teach myself to program. So the goals I set for myself, and this is why I think it can apply to more than just game development in general, is I was like, I want to know how to make something move when I click it. Right. And it was that simple. So I'm not great with tutorials, like watching them for an hour and then applying them. I'm someone who has to like do hands-on stuff and beat my head against the wall until I get it. So I went and found code that did what I needed or was similar to what I needed. I took it and altered it or created variants of it to do other things until I got what I wanted. When I clicked something happened. And then I'd take that code and I'd kind of go out from there. But I had completed that first little goal. That first little goal of clicking something and something happened was done. And I was like, oh, whoa, I totally did that. Great. And it made me feel good about doing it, which threw me into just wanting to do additional things of, well, now I'm going to try this. Now I'm going to try that. Now I'm going to try that. And it's like, okay, well, now I have this thing moving. That's what I wanted. Now I need to get interaction happening when I walk up to something when I move a key press, something like that, right? And it kind of went on like that. Mm-hmm. And just those little things eventually added up to a skill set. And then it became, well, now I can start trying to make a game that utilizes the things I learned. And you can do exactly that for your game as a whole. I need to make an environment. Okay. Mm-hmm. What's in the environment? I need to make some doors. Okay. Now I'll make a door today. I'll make a couple doors today. Each one you complete gets you closer to that goal. And that's really, to me, that's the key of it for everything, is you keep it in small bites. Even the large things, you turn it into small bites, and that will keep you going. And that's how I've been able to do it anyway.
Yeah, I think that I agree that a lot of people they maybe create a thing that they want to do. They're like, I want to renovate my basement, right? I want to have 2 rooms, a bathroom, a playroom, and a utility room. And they have, my wife is very guilty of this, and not in a bad way, because I think you do need to collaborate on things like that. But like it's hard to just be like, let me look at this chunk, let me look at this corner, and decide what I want to do with that corner and move out from there. Because I think a lot of people are just like, I want to, I just graduated from not community school, but communications, and I want a talk show. I was just talking to a friend of mine about something like that last night as I was prepping for this interview. And as I was like, I think a lot of people are just like, they're seeing what they want the end result to be, and they're just kind of like, well, how do I get there? It was like, well, first of all, maybe you need to see if, someone needs an intern, if you don't have any experience, see if someone needs an intern, or if someone's got, some sort of introductory producer work, just the bits and pieces, because I guarantee anybody you see on a high level that are doing any of those jobs in media, like they've got a big radio show, they've got a big, Twitch stream or YouTube channel, like they know every little piece of what goes on up to that point, because honestly, being in radio and having been around people who are in TV and stuff like that, the actual being on camera is like the smallest part of the job. It's the tiniest part, and it's a compilation. And I think that you put it very well. Like, find the one thing that you want to get done. And I don't think people are very good at rewarding themselves for small things because they just see, oh yeah, I want this game to be a thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you lose motivation so fast. I mean, I've known plenty of people who like say they want to write a book, right? And they think about the end result. They want to be the person that has already written a book, you know, because it's like there's just so much minutia to go through to just try and get to the point of I have written a book, right? There's all these little steps, and I think it can be hard to really break that down in a meaningful way for a lot of people, myself included, on a number of things. It took a while to get to a point where I could actually convince myself that I needed to take a step back. When you're deep in something, you just kind of want to keep driving on it. And it's really important to be able to identify, okay, I'm spinning out. I need to just move away from what I'm doing and take a high level look at everything. I had an art director at Disney that really got me super into it being okay to take a breath and step back. You know, he was always, every time there was anything, I was like, this needs to get done. And he's like, well, let's take a moment. I'm like, there's no time to take a moment, dude. But it's like this, it really got me realizing that it's like the world's not going to burn down tomorrow if you take an extra moment, right? And that's going to make the quality so much higher. So that kind of just disseminates down into everything, where you just, if I find myself losing motivation, I know it means I need to step back and look at the schedule, because not even a schedule, just your punch list, whatever you want to call it, right? That means that I've lost my goal. And so I need to re-find my goal, and then I'll be able to push forward. And I think that's really what's missing for anybody when they start to feel that they've lost their target, so they can't hit it.
Because I know, obviously you on the dev side, me watching people, you know, do YouTube and do Twitch and stuff like that. Like, you see people who are burning out all the time, and, you know, they'll make the announcement on Twitter, like, oh, I'm taking a break, guys. I'll be back, you know, after I've recharged my batteries and figure out what's going on. And that's good. I mean, it's a good thing, but I think some people let that go too long sometimes, you know, and it's just kind of more of one of those, like, you're really just stressing yourself out. And I think a lot of it comes with age and knowing yourself and knowing to be like, it's time to check myself here and just step back, because it's so easy to get tunnel vision and get locked in, and
you gotta keep going.
yeah, you got to keep moving. Let's see. The one thing that I've talked about with a lot of my friends who, you know, a lot of us are just, you know, we dabble in content creation. You know, I've done this for a long time, but, you know, it's never been my main job. But I think about it, just watching stuff almost like in a sociological experiment, you know, like from the outside. And I'm wondering, as games come out and people play them and record them for YouTube and stuff like that, has that changed the way you approached gaming? Like the way, like knowing, okay, someone could stream this and I want to make sure it's something that is usable for that medium, because it is, at this point, like, especially I'm thinking at an indie level, like it can make or break a game sometimes if the right person says this sucks or this is great.
100%. Yeah. What's funny is there's just recently an honest trailer was made for Mortuary Assistant. Yeah. And I remember one of the lines was like, check out the latest streamer bait that is, you know, and it's like, it's not wrong. But it's really interesting, because this is something that I brought up, I think, at Tryon when we were, I think I was working on Trove, I forget. But either way, it was talking about things we needed to make and trying to position things that would be perceived well online, right? And work better in these smaller chunks. And now that's more true than ever, I think, where it's like, it's really weird. Unless you're AAA and building this giant thing, even then you want to make sure you have moment to moment stuff that captures well, right? I mean, that's been the way since the dawn of making trailers for video games, right? Mm-hmm. It's essentially the same concept, but you're trying to make gameplay that, you know, will generate something that will make YouTubers and streamers want to play it, because they're going to want to get the clips. They're going to want to be able to make videos, right? And interesting because I did go into Mortuary Assistant thinking about that. The haunt system and everything I ended up doing was stuff I wanted to do, but it also lends itself really well to content creation. And that's something I've tried to pivot a little bit towards because I feel I kind of have a special place in my heart for content creators because I feel they are in the same struggle as indie developers where, they're taking so much time to put so much of themselves into something and then they put it out there for everybody to see and maybe nobody will see it. Right. Or maybe someone will see it and they'll hate it or something. Right. So I really like it. I've had content creators contact me and be like, are you okay with me making a video of your game? And I'm like, absolutely. If you can make content off of my work, do it. If you can make multiple things of content off of it, do it. Not from some level of like, I want to be seen as much as possible, but from a like, if you're able to do that work and get something valuable out of there, if it gets you views, do it. Because obviously it's going to help me too. It's a symbiotic relationship. They want the content. I'm helping create that, and that content helps show my work. So yeah, it absolutely influences what I make, and probably most indie developers, I'd imagine.
I got to think it's changed the way everything's developed. Because I mean, if some like when the game dropped, when Mortuary Assistant came out, I'm just like, oh great, I get to see how this is received because I've been pumped about it, and a lot of people that are that have been kind of following you and you stream some of your deving and stuff like that on Twitch. And like, it's just cool to see, all right, how's the rest of the world receiving this? Like one of my friends right now is streaming the game before we got started. And you always want to be like, what's going to be the reaction to this? And then, like, oh, is she going to figure out how to, to find the code for this thing. Right. And it's just kind of like, it's fun to see that. So I'm sure on your level, it's just like, they're playing the thing you created. I'm just excited because they're playing a game that I really like, or I'm playing, I'm excited about.
Well, yeah, it's I think part of the approach, at least the way I look at it, is what's interesting about it is Twitch and like the live streaming like that and everything is like you're playing a game with your friend in your living room. There was I have a buddy, really good friend of mine, works at Discord now. He was a roommate with me for a while, and I remember playing Dark Souls 2, and he would just sit next to me and watch me play, and like he'd give me like help if I needed it, or he'd look something up for me because he played it too, and he's also super into Dark Souls. So it's like I feel like that experience is what people get out of the Twitch experience, the YouTube experience, and I think that's what I really like about trying to make games that facilitate that a bit, because you do get a bit of that, like you can talk about it. And that's really what I wanted from Mortuary Assistant also, was I wanted something that everybody had a different experience. So they had the same framework to work in when they're talking about it. Like, obviously, the ins and outs of the game and you can talk about those things, but that gives you a space to then be like, well, did you see this? Well, did you see that? Did this happen to you? Right. And that's what I really wanted, was to try to build something that people could talk about outside of the game, because it's a single player game. And I wanted to have some sort of system where people could still feel they're involved with each other. And I feel like, the way I approach games, I try to add sort of a filmic feel to certain things. So I kind of wanted that same, like after a movie, when you walk out and you stand in a circle and you talk about it with each other, like that's kind of what I wanted to emulate.
That walk out of a movie feeling has always like been, I don't know what matches that sometimes, when you come out of a movie, especially if it's like a movie you're like pumped about and you come out like, I'm looking at the world differently right now, and it wears off after a while, but like you still come out because your brain's just had all these weird chemicals that you've been immersed in another world for a little bit.
2 hours.
Yeah. For 2 hours. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like just to see people just see it for the first time. And what I love about Mortuary Assistant, honestly, is the fact that now that I've been through the game and I've gotten the endings, and I'm still going back and just casually working on bodies. Like, you're just kind of like, yeah, this is a thing I do. Just talk to people and work on bodies on this video game. And but to see other people excited about it and sharing their clips and stuff on Twitter has to feel really good. And the fact that I see people getting scares that I hadn't had that I'm just like, whoa, that's cool. I didn't realize that was a thing, because I have been bitching about that closet in the bathroom. I'm like, something could really scare you in here. It's so dark in that corner.
Why doesn't it use this?
Nothing ever does. And I saw someone's clip where they got scared. I was like, I haven't gotten that yet. It's just, it's kind of cool to see. And it's kind of cool that everyone gets their own kind of taste of it and their own experience, because something that might have been a simple thing at one point for me to play was now a scare tactic for someone else. And it was just really cool to see that. And I'm sure just the flood of clips that you've seen has been insane.
It's been surreal, I think. I've been really fortunate with how it's been received. And I mean, you're talking about all the different scares, and that was a huge risk, or rather, I guess you could look at it as sacrifice that I had to make, where I just had to accept that I'm making over 100 right now. As it stands, there's over 100 haunting events outside of the story ones and everything, the story events. So I had to accept that any individual player on their playthrough will not see 99% of them. Right. Yeah. Right. So it's like, that has to be okay. And I think that is part of, what makes it feel sort of unique for each person. The fact that something can play, and if you don't discover it, if you don't see it, the mimic's on the cabinet staring at you. But if you don't notice that, eventually it goes away. And if it fails, it'll get thrown back into the circulation to be used again, depending on how it failed. And maybe you'll run into it, maybe not. Maybe you've progressed past that point, but you won't see it, but the next person might. And that's what I think keeps it interesting. And then especially if you're a content creator, I've had people message me saying that, like, they didn't notice something until they went back and edited things. And then they noticed that this thing was staring at them the entire time, and that creeped them out. And I'm like, all right, good, cool.
Yeah, that's always interesting. Like, I don't even think it was the live game. I think it was when I played the second demo, the one you released last year. Was it last year that the demo came out? I think it was.
I think. Yeah, or close to it.
The rebrushed up demo from the original. And we were playing that, and I look over and like chat's like, "Oh my God, did you see that?" And I was like, "I didn't see anything," and I had to go back later and look, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he's just sitting there staring at me as I'm doing something else, and my attention's on this corner." It's kind of wild, because then the audience gets the scare, whereas the actual person, it's kind of like watching someone in a movie that's doing something in one room and they've got the camera, and Michael Myers is just standing in the other room waiting on him, and you're kind of like, and they never actually run into each other.
And that's part of what I was talking about. You were saying, has the stuff like work been altered by content creation, stuff like that? I think that's part of it, is creating something for the audience too. And it kind of comes from that same point where it's like, I get asked like what my favorite horror games are all the time.
Yeah.
And I've played plenty of horror games, they're fun and everything, but I don't have it's not all I play all the time, as some people would expect. I guess horror movies are actually where most of my interests go and where most of my inspiration comes from. And I try to create sort of movie feeling moments, whether they're during the gameplay for the player or something. In this case, for Mortuary Assistant, I was trying to also do something for the audience if the player missed it, so it's kind of thinking about those things as well.
Yeah, it's always fun to watch just people kind of, squirm in chat. They're like, "Oh my God!" Like the sounds, the sound design, and like just the crunching, the squelching, and all this stuff. People are just like, ugh, and that just freaks them out. They're like, okay, I gotta watch on mute. I can't deal with the sound of the trocar in the abdomen. So we talked about the fact that you worked on some Warhammer stuff, you did stuff with Disney, you've done a ton of stuff, and then you went to solo. So aside from money, what do you think, if you could, what skill or resource would you make unlimited in regards to development? If you could be like, I need more of that all the time, I need more of that. And it's probably, I could probably think of one or two things, but obviously money aside.
I mean, yeah, obviously the next one is time, but that ties into money because that supports your ability to do it. Yeah, it would have to be maybe support of if you could, this is such a weird thing because I've had pretty terrible partnerships, and you got to be careful. But if you could have a devoted partner that is as interested as you and as dedicated as you, that could do, whether they're doing programming or art or something like that all day, because you could get things done so much faster, and you have someone to collaborate with and bounce ideas off of and stuff like that. The problem is that it's extremely hard to find someone that is as passionate about development on the same level that you are, even if it's a game you both have designed together and gotten inspired to do. I've worked in groups of like 3 or 4 where everybody just kind of falls off over time and they just kind of lose their steam. So that's unfortunately also very difficult. But yeah, it's like other than food and if you could just get a stream of assets that you didn't have to make, that aren't just flipped from the asset store.
Right.
things like that, right?
I think I heard a developer one time say being a dev, going in and out of groups like that, like you were talking about, is a lot. He's like, it's like being in a band. It's like sometimes you got a band that's like everybody's firing on all cylinders, and sometimes you just have people who just never show up to practice, or just stuff like that. Like you can have great moments, and you can have terrible situations where not everybody clicks or whatever. Yeah,
it's weird because I've had groups of people while I was working in AAA. We just did it outside of work. It usually came from the wrong place. It came from people being tired of what was happening in the office, right? They weren't happy with some aspect of development or someone in a leadership role or something like that. So it's sort of like, I'm going to make my own game with blackjack and hookers and all that sort of stuff, right? So you get your group of people, and eventually that issue, that upset kind of wears off, because you've got your salary, you've got your day-to-day work, and then the weekend comes around, and then suddenly people kind of start just getting back into their normal life, and the heat dies down. And that was always upsetting to me. That happened to me like 2 or 3 times, I think. And I was like the person that did the work in the group, right? Or show up and it's like, wait a minute, where is everybody? Right. So that's a really difficult one. And then just outside of work, like you'll find people that want to work on games together, but the skill sets, the abilities are so vastly, like they could be massively different. You could have someone who's just fresh out of school or hasn't gone to school, or they could be a veteran, or they could be someone that kind of knows what they're doing, but they're not easy to work with or something. It's like there's so many wild cards out there when trying to work in a group, and that was a problem that I kept hitting. And finally, I was just like, I need to teach myself to program, because if I want to swim in this environment, I'm going to need to be able to keep making stuff on my own if things like this happen again, right? Because I had a bit of a thing that went south, and that put me in sort of a bad spot financially. So that's where I was like, it's like I'm knee deep in it. I either sink or swim. So that's where I started learning to program, and it just that's how I ended up just being solo. It just kind of worked out that way. And I was like, well, I know I can keep going. So that's that much I've learned about myself. So I can keep doing that. And sure enough, the 5-year march that has been my time in indie has been working out. Like this has been the first one to really be like well received and everything, and it's been doing well, and I feel extremely fortunate.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's been cool to watch. Honestly, it's been really neat to just watch you just kind of develop up to this point, and just just to have all these accolades come in, and just to see that in my timeline is just really cool. So I know it has to feel really, really good. So as we start to wrap this side of the show up, I did put out feelers for people who wanted to ask questions and stuff like that, and I've got a good few of them for the Lopez Radio side. But since this ties into what we've been talking about, I got quite a few questions about young developers that are just, and I'm sure you get these questions all the time. So how do I get to the point where I can make my own game and stuff like that? But one of the things I thought would be a good one to answer is there a community where young developers can get together with others, kind of like a Stack Overflow kind of situation where people can just kind of talk to other people. It's tough to do on the internet, I'm sure, because you just get people who don't care.
I mean, it's, there are groups like Facebook groups and stuff like that, but there's also places like TIG Source. I don't know how active that is nowadays, but I mean, it might be. It's still it's a forum where there's a lot of developers. But honestly, the forums for like Unity, the forums for Unreal, like those are all people developing in it, right? They all hang out in there. Now, Polycount, which is actually where I posted my work that got me my job at Mythic. That looks like I don't visit as often anymore, but I do from time to time. And it looks like there's a development portion spawning there now. Like there are people that work within that, people looking for work that do sound design or they do art or whatever. And so those communities do exist. But yeah, they are tough to find. I think one thing that makes it a little easier nowadays, at least, is places like Twitch, where if you just go to the game development channel, and see who's doing what, like go to that category, you get a chance to meet people and see what their personalities are like, how hard they work. And yeah, everybody's got to put on a little something for when they're streaming, right?
Sure.
But ultimately for game development, people are working and you'll get a good idea of who they are. So you can get to know various developers and then see where they hang out. If they hang out somewhere, you can get to know them. And maybe even form actually before this previous partnership went south. That's actually how I met this person that I was working with. I was watching one of their streams and they were struggling with making an asset. And I was just like, you know what, that's it. I'm going to make this for you. So I made the thing for them and gave it to them. And then we started talking, and that's how that ended up happening. So there are places to do it still. But yeah, it's definitely hard to find those specific places. But I would look at Facebook for groups, as much as I hate Facebook.
Sure.
There are still indie groups there. Polycount, TIG Source, Unity Answers, and then the forums for both like Unity, Unreal, depending upon your poison of choice. Then those are your places, and whatever tools you use, say you use like Maya or Blender or whatever, you can go to those communities as well, because there's a tremendous amount of overlap, right? And there tends to be like subsections within those where, like, say you use ZBrush and you go to the ZBrush community stuff. There might be a section there for developer stuff, right? Not just for art. So those things are worth checking out, because I would say just look for the communities of the tool sets that you use, because you're going to find people that already know the things you use and will potentially be passionate about it. And in there, you may find like-minded people. And it doesn't have to be a place specifically for indie developers, right? Because again, say I'm a Maya user and I go to the Maya forums and we do, art stuff and talk about art things. Maybe you can be like, well, I also kind of want to make a game. Oh, well, I've wanted to make a game too. Well, maybe we could find it, right? And you can kind of start connecting through that. So I think it's really more about finding like-minded people that share the same interests that you do. Yeah. And then from there, you'll meet some overlap with people who want to develop is what I would say probably would be the best way to find additional people.
Which seems to be kind of a common thread amongst anybody who's creating anything. If you want to be an actor, I have my friend Slick on who's an actor, and it's just like you just got to surround yourself with people who are in that mindset. And like you said, it might be tough to find people who want to work on your thing as hard as you want to, because they've got a thing they want to do too. But just to be around those minds and just kind of bat those things around. If you want, like, I've always felt like if you want to, anything that you want to do, like, go seek out the people that do it all the time. And I think that a great place to start, like you said, are developers on Twitch, because they're usually just chilling out and doing, and it's kind of, because like you said, you're not going to have that normal, I'm throwing on a Dr. Disrespect thing while I'm coding, because it doesn't really work, right? You just kind of, you can only put that front up for so long before you're just kind of like, I'm just banging out code and, drawing this thing or something. I
think part of the advantage too, as sad as it is sometimes because you're streaming, there's usually a pretty low viewer count.
Yeah.
So you get good conversation a lot more easily. You get a direct connection with the developer a lot more easily. And I think you have a higher chance of connecting with somebody.
Yeah, I can't really see someone indie developing like to 1,300 people in the chat. Look at the way he typed that code, man.
Yeah. There's nothing is particularly sexy to the point where 700 people want to hang around,
Right. So your G Fuel flavor's not coming anytime soon, right? Darkstone Digital grape or something like that.
Yeah.
But the only other thing, and you kind of answered it, but it is. Someone asked me, is it better to dip your toe into aspects and specialize, or is it easier to take a little bit of everything? And I feel like at least the way it seems anyway, is like being a jack of all trades is a good thing, but like, don't think you can do it all at once. Right.
Yeah, no, the thing about doing that is you're probably going to end up biting off more than you can chew, because like approaching everything, you're going to not be good at anything. It's like usually you need to take an approach to one thing that you are passionate about. And then once you kind of master that and understand that, the other things will come a little bit easier and you can start to grab at other things. Like, again, to use the programming example, because I use that a lot because I didn't know how to 5 years ago. I was able to take my experiences in AAA working with other engineers creating like tools that artists would use. Obviously, I didn't do any programming myself, but working with them so much, I learned a lot of the language and the sort of things that I would need to look for and things like that. So I at least knew what to search for when I was doing it. Right. And I think that kind of becomes the case for anything you might want to learn. Like if you go at it all and try to do art and programming and I guess Unity or Unreal all at once, I think it's going to be overwhelming. Now it's tough because if you grab Unity, and that kind of requires you to do some programming and art things to plug things together. You don't have to necessarily, like you could just use you can make boxes move around, right? So I think at that point, you just need to strap on blinders for certain things, right? If you want to get, if you're trying to make a game and that's the thing you want to do, you need an engine. So you've got to learn it. So starting somewhere, I would say you pick up Unity or Unreal, you throw a cube in there, forget about the art and try to figure out how to make everything work, right? And then from there, you can start messing with art once you figured that out, because that's a whole new skill set that's going to take a long time to build, and vice versa. If you want to have some amazing art, you got to take the time to be an artist first. And that takes, I think, a lot longer to build, because that there are techniques that can build mileage for art, and I believe anybody can learn. But I think it's weird because you decide when you're good enough for the thing you're trying to make. So I think it's a little easier to do engineering side first there, because there are obvious points where you're like, I have figured out how to do this. It may not be efficient, but it works, So it's still whatever you're doing, however you want to approach it, what it boils down to is don't do all of it all at once. It's just going to be overwhelming. You're going to lose your motivation, and it goes right back to the individual goal thing that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I mean, all that makes sense. And I can't imagine that that any of this advice is, lost on somebody, because I think it is just so important to take, to just listen to professionals, like people who are actively doing it. And, if you see Brian streaming on Twitch, go check him out, ask him questions. Like, it's not like he's never shy about answering things. I
get into some talking matches. Yeah. I can go for a while.
Sure. But I think that's a great thing. Like, I think that there's some people who feel like, when you look at a certain realm of something, and it's true in some cases, but like for the most part, they want other people to be excited about the thing they're doing too. They want people to be, because, it's one of those like, more people just creates a better environment for creating usually. And you do run into some people who are kind of like, these are my secrets and I got here on my own and I can't share it with you.
I get that simply because I used to be that way too. I think it comes from not being fully confident in what you have, right? Because I get Specifically, I'm thinking of like game ideas, right? It could be anything, whether it's trade secrets or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of people will think like they come up with a game design and like, I can't let anybody know. No one can know about this idea. They'll steal it. And it's like, well, ultimately, actually, I was asked about this like maybe a couple weeks ago. Ultimately, someone hears your idea, they probably have their own idea they want to make.
Sure.
And if they hear your idea and go, hey, that's a good idea, are they going to be passionate about it enough to get all the programs they need and start making it?
Yeah.
Well, probably not. If they are, then are they going to be able to develop the game faster than you, the original idea owner, would? Probably not. But it's just like there are so many gating points where like I shared a lot of Mortuary Assistant development early on. And I tend to do this with all my game development where I'll show all of it up until I get to like major story stuff or the ending or stuff like that, or I get close to launch. And then I'll kind of fall off for like a month because I'm finishing up the game. And I just don't want to give away like story points and stuff like that.
Right.
But at any point in time during development, from when I did the prototype, which I also did on stream like 3 years ago now or whatever it was, to the demo up to release, like people had ample time to take that idea and make it. And nobody did. I mean, there's I guess Autopsy Simulator that I guess is coming out at some point, but it's still a different game.
Sure.
And I don't think, if they're a horror game where you do autopsies, I doubt they're going to have something akin to the Haunt system that I have. Like that's there's elements that I just don't think any individual, when they hear your idea, will just be able to take it and make exactly what you are going to make. And you need to have confidence in the things that you're making to know that another person won't be able to do it the same way. And like that's weird because you don't want to have an air of like vanity to yourself, right? Like, oh, well, of course I'm going to make it better than anybody else, right? No, but I mean, just the belief that you can do it is really it. And as someone who struggles with imposter syndrome horribly all the time, it's still possible to do.
Yeah. I think that I think what people don't delineate sometimes is idea versus a vision, right? Like, no, you can have an idea for a game, but like no one's going to be able to lay it out the way you're seeing it in your head. Like, I don't think if someone were to be like, I'm going to make Mortuary Assistant Redux and like, I'm going to do like, there's no way they can make it look exactly the way you were going to make it look. Like I would love to, it would be the longest, most time wasting experiment ever, but take an idea for a game and make and give like all the bones to it and have two people develop it side by side and see how they get to that ending point. Right. I want it to start here. I want it to end here.
You have a similar, you kind of get that with, I think game jams are a good example of taking an idea and going wildly different with it than someone else, right? Because usually they're set up to be pretty loose. But you could make a game jam that is a little more specific and you still get wildly different interpretations, right? So I think you can take from that, like if someone had the idea of, oh, this guy's doing embalming. Okay, well, I could make an embalming game. That's pretty much where the concept ends. And where they go with it, they may not even make a horror game. They may make some sort of like, sim thing where you're trying to run a successful business and you're trying to embalm as many bodies as possible. Right?
Two point mortuary, where you're just a management game. You're like, oh, the bodies need to be turned over,
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, it's interesting because it feels like that knee-jerk reaction comes from really believing you have a special idea.
Yeah.
But it also comes from not believing that you have something that you are able to really deliver on that super special thing, I think.
Yeah. And there's a confidence to it, right? Like there's a confidence to being,
that's what I'm saying. Yep.
Yeah. Just kind of sitting like, so it's similar to, I had Games with Death on a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about just creating on Twitch in general. And he's like, you can see a confident, like bigger streamer when they actually raid people, when they actually give their people over to someone else and they're just like, well, I'm not worried. Like, not that they're not worried about losing people, but they're just kind of like, well, I'm my own thing and this person's their own thing too. So it's not, they're not giving them the same product that I'm giving them. And it's like that, it always seems to come back to beer for me, but, I don't know if you ever seen where a brewery has a very popular beer and they will actually take that top secret recipe and they'll hand it to other breweries and be like, you brew your rendition of this and we're going to call it like a collaboration. So yeah, there's been a couple of places where like I think it was Allagash, like did like Allagash White, and then they were like, all right, we'll give these breweries their and make them do their take on our recipe, and that's always cool to see when someone's just kind of like that confident to be like, we don't care if you have our recipe, but here you go.
Well, what's I think interesting about that, and this is why I think ultimately it's a good thing, is if someone gets that beer and they go, oh, it's like an Allagash,
Yeah.
But it's like, it's a different version of it. Okay. Yeah. You're automatically thinking of their product. Right. And so I think ultimately that stuff is okay. Like I think there's an issue probably in streaming and content creation as well, but in indie development, I think where like indie devs don't always want to like share other indie devs' work and like kind of help lift them up, because they're worried it's going to take away from them, in the same way that you're talking about the raid, right? Where it's like, really, if you help lift somebody up, it shows that you're actually there to be in the community and help people that are in the same scenario. And also it says something about yourself being like willing to do that, especially if you have a larger audience. And it's that like, that's the, oh, I've seen this guy because so-and-so shared him, so-and-so is now the Allagash, right? So it's like that, I think, is something that really needs to be, I think it just needs to go away, is this problem with, it's not exactly knocking someone down to build yourself up, but it is sort of like not telling other people about it because you think maybe it'll knock you down. And it comes from that same confidence. I think I think all stems from that same mental space of what I'm doing is something that I feel is special, but I don't feel confident, so I don't want to share it. Right. And so I think that kind of all comes from the same place. And I think, like my publisher, there's a game, Mirror Forge, that they're publishing. And he had put a link to them on my Steam page and just messaged me in the middle of the night. And he was like, oh, by the way, I put this link to their game on your page. If that's okay with you, I can take it down if you don't like that. And I'm like, no, get them out there, do their thing. Like I want other people to succeed too. Like I want, I don't want to be the only one that, Dread XP is like, oh, we're the Mortuary Assistant company, right? No, I want them to have lots of games that are successful, because what that also means is not only are they a very small publisher becoming successful, but the developers that they're trying to help lift up also become successful. And when we do that, everybody's happy because people get better games, people are more confident in the work they make, and ultimately it's just better for everybody. So, you get everybody circulating with each other and it becomes an actual community instead of this kind of weird half community where it's like, we're all game devs, support indie developers. Right. And then, only a fraction are like, well, actually, check everybody out,
Yeah.
And that's tough to do.
Yeah. And I think too, that comes with just time in the industry too, I'm sure, like to be like, oh, okay. Like I've seen this happen before, and now you kind of have a broader view than you did maybe when you were starting out. Because when you're starting out, you're like, oh no.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, that happened over again when I first went into indie and started doing my own stuff. I think there's levels of that for like, I don't think it matters how old you are. I think it's just how new you are to a concept, that it until you build confidence in it, you kind of have a little bit of that no matter what. You can tell yourself not to. You can have experience where you shouldn't do that, and maybe you're better about it than the next guy. Yeah. But it's still there. I think that's just human. So you just kind of have to get over that, and that's tough to do.
Yeah, I think that, I'm glad you said like it doesn't really matter like how old you are or when you start and stuff like that. Because I mean, there's stories everywhere about people who just decided later on, I want to do this thing. I mean, look at the guy who made Dark, just like, I'm gonna just teach myself how to do this, and this is what I want to make, and it ended up working out. Like there's just different ways to get there, and honestly, I think some of the stuff you shared on offline today is super valuable to people, and I hope it lands where it needs to land, because I hope
so. Yeah, me too. I love when people actually get something from my ramblings.
Yeah, well, I mean, every industry like this needs fresh bodies, so to speak, right? Like they need people to get in there, and because you never know who's going to have that thing that's going to change the way things look, the way things are done, and just create, it always, we'll get into this in Lopez Radio, but it's always interesting, like how there's a game that comes out and all of a sudden now there's a Souls-like genre, right? Like everything is Souls-like, and it's like you just never know what's going to take a life of its own. So
and it makes everybody step up.
Yeah. Well, it does. I think people get comfortable, right? They get in there and they're like, all right, I've been doing this for years. I'm good. I've worked on these projects, and blah blah blah, and it's kind of like the old undefeated champion that's just no one's beaten. So all of a sudden, just kick back, relax a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get murked by this new guy. But I do appreciate you being on offline. Like I said, I'm going to have links up to all of Brian's stuff, Twitter, DS Digital Dev. Be sure to follow him there. He's very active and very interactive with people that talk with him there. Are you back to streaming yet, or are you just kind of taking a break from that for now?
Not yet. Not because I'm like, I'm taking a break from streaming, but it just kind of worked out that way because like I said, I launched, and then I was working on patches and stuff, and then I had trips, and now I'm going to PAX, and it's like, I'm just kind of waiting until the dust settles, and then I'll be able to basically when I can be working on patches for the game and it's fine to show it, and like I'm back to trying to make Patreon prototypes and things like that. That stuff is what I want to get back to, and that'll be sooner than later. But yeah, that's awesome. I will have links to all that stuff and links to for people to go check out the Steam page for Mortuary Assistant. If you enjoyed this, we're going to continue talking over at Lopez Radio, and I'll get some more questions answered, and we'll talk a little bit deeper about Mortuary Assistant and get to know Brian a little bit more, because there's much more than just deving all the time, I'm sure. So, but thanks again for being on, dude, and thank you very much. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'll see you over at Lopez Radio, guys. Get out there and create something.